keep trying to figure out how I'm going to start my podcast. I've recorded 4 other episodes, and I I think I jump in a little too hard on things that I'm passionate about, and maybe I need to start kind of from the beginning. So I'm gonna start. I kind of wrote a book, kind of my theology. It's about 40 pages long. I honestly thought it was going to be about 3 or 4 pages, and then I realized I've got a lot more to say about it, and it's a lot more complex and a lot more nuanced than I thought. So, but I did write this section called "When Did My Faith Start Shifting?" and I think that's probably a good place for me to begin. I'm not going to read this word for word, but I am going to start with this. So, in 2002 to 2003, my wife and I lived in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and we started attending Rob Bell's church, Mars Hill. And I know I probably just lost some people because I just mentioned Rob Bell, because he's now seen as a heretic in the church world. But that's okay. His What he was teaching then was awesome. I learned a ton. One of the things that I thought was real interesting is the way he taught. I wouldn't say that his style of teaching was good for new believers. I grew up in the church, so I like to have some of my theology challenged a little bit, and that's definitely what he did. The how old was I then? 23, 24, 25, something like that. And I saw what Christians did and how they not how they acted, but looking at from the outside, specifically, like they did Christmas, they did Easter, they met on Sunday, things like that. And I started looking, I started thinking, what what happened? Because in John 14:15 it says, Jesus says, "If you love me, keep my commandments." Yet Christians don't keep the commandments at all. I feel like the church has extremely misunderstood verses like Colossians 2:14, where the law is nailed to the cross. That to me is just completely misunderstood. The word commandment is used 69 times in the New Testament, and there are a lot of commandments that Jesus said to keep. In fact, look at Matthew 5:17 through 19. I'm just going to read these verses. "Do not think that I have come to abolish the Torah or the prophets. I did not come to abolish it, but to fulfill. Amen, I tell you. Until heaven and earth passes away, not the smallest letter or serif shall ever pass away from the Torah, until all things come to pass." Has everything come to pass yet? No, it has not. "Therefore, whoever breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches others the same shall be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever keeps and teaches them, this one shall be great in the kingdom of heaven." So Jesus clearly said to keep the commandments. And the church has no problem with the 10 commandments. So, in fact, they would say that you're supposed to keep the Sabbath specifically. That's one of the 10 commandments. Yet, the biblical Sabbath is defined Friday night sunset to Saturday night sunset. Yet, the church has redefined that to Sunday somehow. It's real interesting. So they claim to keep the 10, but they don't. Why is that? I think that the majority of the reason why these commandments aren't taught to be kept is because of anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism doesn't exist in the Tanakh or the New Testament, but somehow the church interprets things in the New Testament as extremely anti-Semitic. It's called replacement theology or supersessionism, meaning that the Old Testament has been superseded by the New Testament, which makes absolutely no sense. To me, that's just evil theology. And the problem is that it is completely baked into Christianity. And even people I know that don't believe in replacement theology, they don't believe that the Jewish people have been replaced by the church, yet they go to churches that teach these things, and they're subtle. It's subtle. It's in the lyrics of songs sometimes, where I'll hear a Christian song and I hear it and I'm like, ooh, that's replacement theology in a song. They say it in such a nice, kind way, but there's so much replacement theology, and it it's 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 hard to see it until you step away from it, and you're away from it for a long time. I left the church in 2008, and I didn't really see replacement theology. It took me a few years to start seeing that, and now that I've stepped even further away, where there's a lot of Christian tradition or traditional Christian teachings that I don't believe anymore, and now I see it even more. So, and some people would say that there isn't anti-Semitism in the church, but it's foundational to the church. Let me give you this quick history lesson. Constantine, the emperor of Rome, moved the capital of the Roman Empire from Rome to Constantinople in 330 CE. It was located in, or is located in modern day Turkey, and as the western side of the Roman Empire started to collapse, the power of the church also started to shift to Constantinople. It really only makes sense that they would move the capital to Constantinople, but with that the church shifted too, and there were a lot of teachings that are problematic. And let me read this creed. Basically, this is from the. Let me make sure I got this right. This is 4th century Jewish Christian. It's in a book called Bishop of Constantia. I've got the link in here. Maybe I'll share that. But let me just read what was required from a Jew if a Jew wanted to become a Christian. This is around 4th century CE. This is what had to be said. A Jewish person would have to say this to become a Christian. So let me read it. I renounce all customs, rites, legalisms, unleavened breads, and sacrifice of lambs of the Hebrews, and all the other feasts of the Hebrews, sacrifices, prayers, aspirations, purifications, sanctifications, and propitiations, and fast, and new moons, and Sabbaths, and superstitions, and hymns, and chants, and observances, and synagogues, and the food and drink of the Hebrews. In one word, I renounce absolutely everything Jewish, every law, rite, and customs. ... And if afterwards I shall wish to deny and return to Jewish superstition, or shall be found eating with the Jews, or feasting with them, ... may I be excommunicated in the world to come, and may my soul be set down with Satan and the devils. That's pretty disturbing. So basically, according to the Catholic Church, or the Church really at that point, anything Jewish was seen as evil. The Sabbath also was changed, and this is why the church meets on Sunday. There's another, so that was just a creed. Here is something that was canonized in the, in the 4th century, the 29th canon from the Council of Laodicea. There is a canon. So a canon is just like a rule saying this is what we're going to enforce, or this is what we believe. And so the 29th Council of Laodicea, the 29th canon from the Council of Laodicea, says this. It says, Christians must not Judaize by resting on the Sabbath. Okay, remember, the 10 Commandments, supposed to be important, but here's the church 400 years into it, changing it. Christians must not Judaize by resting on the Sabbath, but must work on that day, rather honoring the Lord's Day, which the Lord's Day is Sunday. And if they can, resting then as Christians. But if anyone shall be found being Judaizers, let them be excommunicated from Christ. So, I'm done with my book here. Now I'm just going to riff here a little bit and talk. So, that's why I started questioning things. You have, my whole life was told, do good things, follow the Bible. But when you look into the Bible and you look at Tanakh, look at the Old Testament, and you see these things that are valid for Jews, and then the church on the other side of 325, the Council of what is that? Council of Nicaea. You have extremely different interpretations of everything that the church has said is important. It's been completely changed. You have lots of terms like Son of God, Son of Man, Messiah. There's a lot of things that have been misinterpreted, and Christianity is no longer following anything that's Jewish. And so all of the interpretations that you have are very, very different than what first century believers would have thought. So it's hard to even have a conversation with people now that I know that all of these terms have been reinterpreted to a Christian interpretation. It makes it really hard for me to trust Christian theology, because Son of God to a Christian means something totally different to the Jewish interpretation. Son of Man has a totally different interpretation to Christian theology versus Jewish. And why is that? Well, around 95 CE, once the big split between Jewish, I'll use the word Jewish Christians because that's the only way I can really, that's probably a bad interpretation. I'll say followers of Yeshua. You have a very different interpretation of what they were following versus what Christians believe. And it's fascinating that it took one or two generations, and then once you kick all of the Jewish people out of Jerusalem, yet the Jerusalem Council, or the Church of Jerusalem, continued, filled with Gentiles, you wind up having a interpretation that is no longer a Jewish interpretation of things. And it has completely changed the definition of most things in the New Testament. And that's where I started to shift. Once I started looking back and just saying, why do I believe what I believe? And then you look into how things have shifted and how things have changed. And now I don't claim to be a Christian. I would say that I am more Jewish in my thinking, and Jewish. Jesus is totally kosher if your definitions are proper. And maybe we'll go into that. Maybe that's what the next video is. Thanks.